folks.
Babs, are you coming?
Oh,
Okay, so now we're in the situation.
Oh
with
my, garde-moi dans ça qui
everyone,
là, toi.
everyone would kind of.
Suzanne Robichon. Ha ha.
I
Bonjour,
wanted to
Madame
let you know
Suzanne.
that I have my t-shirt on too.
Woo!
And it's also tight. It's tighter than it used to fit. Hi, Julia Boleyn. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, everybody. My name is Sandra Soto, and I'm going to ask you to mute your microphones for now, but I've loved hearing people say hello in different languages, and you'll have the chance, of course, to turn your microphones back on. Turn the laptop which way? Behind me is this beautiful photograph of Wittig, and you can see it behind several of us, most especially Sande Zeig and Marcia Klotz, and I can't see Liz Kennedy and Bobby Previs right now, but they might have a...
We're there. You can't see us?
I can see you, but I can't see...
Ce que je voulais dire aussi, c'est que le son en français est extrêmement assuré pour moi. Il est très coupé. Là maintenant, je t'entends bien.
It might be your internet connection. C'est peut-être l'internet chez vous.
Ouais, je comprends, Dominique.
Okay. All right. Well, welcome.
Okay, c'est beau.
I am going to speak slowly. I am.
Ah oui, tout à fait.
Let me turn this down a little bit. Everybody okay on tech? Just flag me and let me know if you can't hear me or if I'm talking too fast or too slow. We're gonna make this informal. Hi everybody, I'm so happy to be here with you. My name is Sandra Soto, and I have the great pleasure and honor of welcoming you to our 11th celebration of the Monique Wittig Scholarship Prize. I'm an associate professor at the University of Arizona in the Department of Gender and Women's Studies, where I had the amazingly good fortune to work alongside Wittig as a colleague. And she was actually my official mentor in the department. So she helped me in my first year and a half there here in the University of Arizona. I'm joined here in Tucson with this year's members of the Monique Wittig Scholarship Committee. We are, those of us who are in Tucson are zooming in from traditional Tohono O'odham land and the Pascua Yaqui Nation. And I want to acknowledge that from the very beginning. That's our practice here. The members of the Monique Wittig Scholarship Committee who are here today are Marcia Klotz, Sande Zeig, Liz Kennedy. Liz, you want to wave? Laz Kinnaman, who I don't see yet. I think it might be because her camera is off, but I did see her name pop up. And the incredible Lee Spencer, without whom, she's going like this, without whom a lot of this would not have been possible. So I want to thank all of the members of our committee, and you'll be hearing from several of them today. The next 90 minutes will feature elements that are familiar to many of you who have attended this event in the past. As always, we will feature special guests reading from Wittig's works themselves. So one of the things we do at this annual event is to have people who know Wittig's work well read it and share it, the passages that move them the most. So that will be happening as usual. And of course, we will be featuring our recipients of this year's 2020 Monique Wittig Scholarship. But this year's event is really special because we're experimenting with taking the blueprint for our celebration and we're enlarging it through this technological form, connecting with you now from Paris to Tucson, taking full advantage of the unusual situation we find ourselves in. We also welcome 3 people who are part of today's program. This technological form, Zoom, allows us to have people reading Wittig's work who are very intimate with Wittig's scholarship and poetics, but who usually cannot join us. And Garréta, do you want to, there you are. And I haven't met you, Anne, nice to meet you. Anne Garréta.
Same here, nice to meet you.
Welcome. Where are you zooming in from, Anne?
Great Falls, Virginia, near Washington, the suburbs of Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Laure Murat. Hello. Did
Hello.
tell me the correct way to pronounce that?
That was perfect.
No, I don't think so. I heard you laugh. And Dominique Bourque, who you saw earlier. Hi, Dominique. I've met Dominique before on Zoom, and so it's good to see you again. These 3 visionaries, the 3 that I just named, know Wittig's work well, and we were thrilled when they agreed to join us today to read some of Wittig's most important passages. Dominique has graciously accepted our invitation and request to translate for us from English to French. She teaches French literature and feminist studies at the University of Ottawa. She is a Wittig specialist, and so we are very lucky to have her here doing this work for us. So our gratitude to you. Dominique wants you to know that she is not a translator by trade. And I want you to know that several of us got her our material, our scripts very late, and, as always. And so she didn't have a lot of time in advance with our material. So thank you so much, Dominique, for your patience and for experimenting with this Zoom form. She is definitely doing us a big favor. I want to extend a very warm welcome to 3 people whom Wittig loved very, very much, and who are former colleagues of ours here at the University of Arizona, but are no longer at the University of Arizona. Professor Julia Boleyn. Julia was a colleague of Teo's and a very good friend of Teo's, and a very good friend of mine. It still is. And we miss her here, as we miss Carol Flynn. Carol, the t-shirt that I'm wearing that says the lesbian body is the result of a beautiful event that Carol really organized at an important venue here in Tucson called the Loft Cinema. It's independent cinema, still here. And she had these t-shirts made at the showing. I believe it was the showing of The Girl. Yeah. And then I don't know if Robbie is here yet. Robbie, as far as I know, audio has not moved away from Tucson, but has retired. So we miss him too. Is Robbie here yet?
Yeah, he is. He's not, you can't see his video, but he's here.
Robbie, I hope you can hear me. Hello, we miss you. All 3 of these people were very important to Wittig, worked very closely with her. Carol and Julia in Gender and Women's Studies, and Robbie in the Department of French. They were great supporters of hers while they worked alongside her, and they continue to carry forward the spirit of this event. They're just very, very important to this event. And Carol Flynn is one of the founders of this event. I would also like to welcome Wittig's niece, Dominique Samson. Hello, if you're here, we welcome you. I've never met any of Wittig's relatives. We welcome Wittig's friends, including especially Louise Turcot. Ah, there you are, and I have met you. And you have your champagne or your dry white wine ready to toast. and the many, many feminist scholars of Wittig's work and the fans of Wittig's work are here today. Feel free to scroll around on your screens and feel free to use the chat button. Oh, I see people are already, and there's Robbie saying hello. Today, we honor the life's work of Wittig and celebrate her ongoing importance to feminist theory and praxis. Her imagination, beauty, politics, and poetics, her fierce compassion, her experimentation with form, language, gender, her commitment not to equality, but to radical transformation. What does it mean to think Wittig and to feel Wittigian from this particular vantage point at this particular time, right here, right now, this spring of 2020 on Zoom? A time of great social rebellion, but also a time of increased surveillance, policing, anti-Black racism, and ongoing feminicide. A time of cautious optimism that we might rebuild the institutions that do harm to our bodies, our minds, labor, and futurity, but also a time of increased precarity, illness, death, mourning, grief, and attrition. When I first began preparing these opening comments, I expected to write a sentence talking about how these 90 minutes would, I hope that we could see them as a break from all of those things, from the pandemic, from whatever grief we might be suddenly experiencing because of, I'm sure that there have been losses in your lives, illness in your families. But then I thought that to think Wittig and to feel Wittig isn't to check out, right? Wittig was never about bedside table reading. And so I do want us to have pleasure here and encourage us to have pleasure, but Wittig was all about urgency and political urgency and experimenting with language because of that, because of suffering, and because of her commitment to social justice. One last thing I want to say before I turn it over to Wittig's partner, Sande Zeig. I'm taking a cue from Anne Svekovich, who I was recently in a Zoom meeting with, a seminar on affect, and she sat on the floor and she talked about sitting on the floor in a yoga position. That's what I'm doing now. I have an altar. I don't know if you can see it, but there's an altar here for Wittig behind me.
Oh, wow.
Get our picture too.
Photograph that I believe Julia Boleyn or maybe Carol gave me this photograph, and I've had it framed since her death, and always close by me when I go on sabbatical somewhere. I always take this framed photograph with me. Don't feel stiff at your computers, move around, take care of your bodies. Wittig would want that. Don't feel like this is a meeting. If you need to check in and out, that's fine. Welcome again. Most of you will need no introduction to the great Sande Zeig. Can you wave again, Sande? Sande met Monique Wittig in Paris in 1974. Sande was in Paris studying mime with Marcel Marceau's teacher, Etienne Decroix. She wanted to find a lesbian group and was directed to a meeting of Les Féministes Révolutionnaires. I'm going to do a lot of unfortunate mispronunciation, and I apologize. She asked them if they would like to learn self-defense, as she had been studying karate for 4 years. They asked her to show them what she could do, and apparently satisfied, many started coming to the class. After a class, Sande and a few karate students went to a meeting of the revolutionary feminists. There, in the middle of the crowd, someone wearing a hat was passionately arguing with everyone. Upon seeing her, Zeig's heart nearly fell out of her chest. She asked, "Who is that?" And the reply was, "A writer." Zeig knew she had found the reason she had come to Paris. That moment was the spark of a lifelong partnership and collaboration with Monique Wittig. It is fitting that at this very special ceremony today, we frame the presentations with the filmic homage created by Sande Wittig's lifelong partner. So we're opening and we're closing with a bit of film made by Sande. I'm going to turn it over to Sande, who will talk about this first very short film. And you will hear, as you watch the film, you will hear a passage being read in French. It's from Les Guerrières. We're not going to translate it during the film because we do not want to distract you from the filmic images. But after we watch the film, our colleague Marcia Klotz will read the very same passage that you hear during the film. She will read that in English. So what I need to do now is make sure that Sande has screen sharing privileges.
I do.
Okay, great. And I'm gonna turn it over to you and ask you to talk a little bit about the film.
Okay, thank you, Sande. And I want to thank everyone for being here. It's very moving for me to see so many friends of Theo's and people who are working on her, all of her work, Morgan and Annabelle and Yannick and Suzette Triton, who started Les Amis de Monique Wittig in Paris, Sandra. It's like all of the people I would really like to be with. So it's a very special day for me. And Anne and Laure, can't thank you enough for doing this. It's nice to see. It's just really, I have a special relationship with everyone. And for those people I don't know, thank you. Thank you for coming. So I'm gonna read a few statements about this piece. Basically, 2019 marked the 50th anniversary of Les Guerrières, Monique Wittig's second book, as most of you know. And for me, it's almost impossible to describe the impact on those of us at the beginning of the feminist movement of this book. The book also received major recognition in mainstream press, and many writers wrote about Les Guerrières. In one in particular, Mary McCarthy was a great supporter of Monique Wittig's book. You may not know this, but Mary McCarthy and Monique Wittig had a very important relationship. And the granddaughter of Monique Wittig, I'm sorry, the granddaughter of Mary McCarthy just is writing an article about their relationship. So Mary McCarthy wrote about it and said, it's a delectable epic of sex warfare, an extraordinary leap of the imagination into the politics of oppression and revolt. In 1971, Sally Bowman wrote in the New York Times, with Les Guerrières, Monique Wittig achieves another revolution in our understanding. What she has almost miraculously achieved at one throw is the first novel or hymn, for this book is close to epic poetry, of women's liberation. One of its strengths, indeed, is that it contrives to work on several levels. It's a satiric commentary on man's constant use of literary forms for self-aggrandizement and on current women liberation arguments in which men feature as imperialists and women as the colonized. Yet it is also a hymn of praise to women of astonishing conviction, a blueprint for women in the future. And she also added, it could be that the topicality of her second book will make it something of a cult book, which would not be a bad thing. And indeed, Les Guerrières is one of the most widely read feminist texts of the 20th and 21st century. I wanted to read when Monique Wittig passed away, many people wrote me, and I received a card from someone that touched me very much. I wanted to share it with you. It says, all of us became more guerrières because of her. All of us owe her vivid imagination a wild tribute. Nobody else's work came close to that originality, and few were as radical in its vision. Her name is Jacqueline from Paris. So Wittig wrote any important, many of you know this, there are some people who aren't Wittig scholars, so it's always a good reminder. Wittig wrote, any important literary work is like a Trojan horse at the time it is produced. Any work with new form operates as a war machine because its goal is to pulverize old forms and formal conventions. Linda Zarelli explains the central target of her war machine is the form of sex as it is reproduced through the grammatical logic of pronouns. So when Wittig targets the personal pronoun elle, Wittig explains, in La Guerrière, I try to universalize the point of view of elle. The goal of this approach is not to feminize the world, but to make the categories of sex obsolete in language. All of this is to explain to those who do not know that in English, elle was translated into they, the women, instead of just elle. Wittig writes in her essay, The Mark of Gender, when elle is turned into the women, the process of universalization is destroyed. So even with this, you know, the impact and the lasting power and impression of La Guerrière has not diminished even from the 70s. So for the 50th anniversary, which was 2019, many people gathered, produced readings in theaters, museums, online, and in universities. So next we have a 2.5-minute presentation, which just gives you a visual idea of some of those events. So because it goes very quickly, so I just want to reiterate what some of those events are. So there was a theatrical reading in Art of the Art, a YouTube broadcast, a France Culture Radio broadcast, which was excellent, an art exhibition and readings at Crac, Alsace, which is a center for art very close to where Monique Wittig was born. 2 evenings of readings curated by Suzette Robichon with music DJ'd by Anne Garréta at La Maison de Poésie, where Laure and Anne both participated. A conference at the Beinecke Library at Yale, the home of Monique Wittig's papers, which several people online today attended, participated in, and organized. And lastly, a new book and translations of Monique Wittig's work from 2018 and 2019. So as Sandy said, the audio portion of the video is in French. If you don't understand French, please just listen to it like a soundscape, and Marcia will read these passages right after. So give me one moment and I will share my screen. Okay. And here we go.
Elles disent, ils t'ont tenu à distance, ils t'ont maintenu, ils t'ont érigé, constitué dans une différence essentielle. Elles disent, ils t'ont tel quel adoré à l'égal d'une déesse, ou bien brûlé sur leur bûcher, ou bien ils t'ont relégué à leur service dans leur arrière-cour. Elles disent, ce faisant, ils t'ont toujours dans leur discours traîné dans la boue. Elles disent, ils t'ont dans leur discours possédé, violé, prise, soumise, humilié tout leur soul. Elles disent que, chose étrange, ce qu'ils ont dans leur discours érigé comme une différence essentielle, ce sont des variantes biologiques. Elles disent, ils t'ont décrite comme ils ont décrit les races qu'ils ont appelées inférieures. Elles disent, oui, ce sont les mêmes oppresseurs dominateurs, les mêmes maîtres qui ont dit que les nègres et les femelles n'ont pas le cœur, la rate, le foie à la même place qu'eux, que la différence de sexe, la différence de couleur signifie l'infériorité. Droit pour eux à la domination et à l'appropriation. dont je suis la nièce et qui a été quelqu'un de très important pour moi. Il faut, disent-elles, faire abstraction de tous les récits concernant celles qui, parmi elles, ont été vendues, battues, prises, séduites, enlevées, violées et échangées comme marchandises viles et précieuses. Elles disent qu'il faut faire abstraction des discours qu'on leur a fait tenir contre les pensées et qui ont obéi aux codes et aux conventions des cultures qui les ont domestiquées. Elles disent qu'il faut brûler tous les livres et ne garder de chacun d'eux que ce qui peut les présenter à leur avantage dans un âge futur. Elles disent qu'il n'y a pas de réalité avant que les mots, les règles, les règlements leur aient donné forme. Elles disent qu'en ce qui les concerne, tout est fait à partir d'éléments embryonnaires. Elles disent qu'en premier lieu, le vocabulaire de toutes les langues est à examiner, à modifier, à bouleverser de fond en comble, que chaque mot doit être passé au crible.
And I wanted to just also make one more thanks to Tim Young, who I think is here, who is the curator at the Beinecke Library, who acquired the Monique Wittig paper. I was very grateful to Tim for all of his support.
Thank you, Sandy. And I love that you have some of the photographs right from the Beinecke in that film. It's a real pleasure to introduce the next participant. I cannot overstate how much so many of our lives here in Tucson have been enriched and enlivened since Marcia Klotz has moved here to the desert, to Tucson. We've grown really close as friends and political allies. And from the moment she joined the Department of English and the Department of Gender and Women's Studies here at the University of Arizona, she has been a steadfast supporter of the Monique Wittig Scholarship event. She got it right away. As soon as she got here, she became involved and just has really brought a new, because she teaches in the Department of English, we have a new kind of connection to the English department and to creative writing that we didn't have before. Marcia's teaching and research interests span a broad field, including Marxism, queer theory, and sexuality studies, Christianity and Judaism, genocide and the Holocaust, post-colonial theory, comparative studies. She is writing a book manuscript titled Forgive Us Our Debts, Economic Theology in the Age of Finance Capitalism, or Finance Capital, which is absolutely brilliant. I've heard her give presentations on that work many times. Marcia?
Thank you so much, Sandy. Can you all hear me? And I really want to express my gratitude to Sandy and to the Department of Gender and Women's Studies for maintaining this incredibly important tradition. It's just been such a delight to be part of this scholarship award every year since I got here 7 years ago. It's really been something I look forward to in spring semester every year. And I also just want to express my deep appreciation to Sandra Soto in terms of the work of social justice. Sandy really practices it. She's a phenomenal leader in this community, and Tucson would be so much poorer without her involvement in a number of different struggles on campus and off here. So thank you, Sandy. So I'm going to read first the passage that was read aloud in that last film. And then, because we can't be done with Les Guerrières quite so quickly, I will read a few other passages from that work as well, and I'll try to speak slowly enough that the translation should be able to keep pace. They say, the men have kept you at a distance. They have supported you. They have put you on a pedestal, constructed with an essential difference. They say, men in their way have adored you like a goddess, or else burned you at their stakes, or else relegated you to their service in their backyards. They say, so doing, they have always in their speech dragged you in the dirt. They say, in speaking, they have possessed, violated, taken, subdued, humiliated you to their heart's content. They say, oddly enough, what they have exalted in their words as an essential difference is a biological variation. They say they have described you as they described the races they called inferior. They say, yes, These are the same domineering oppressors, the same masters who have said that Blacks and women do not have a heart, spleen, liver in the same place as their own. The difference of sex, difference of color signify inferiority, their own right to domination and appropriation. They say, yes, these are the same domineering oppressors who have written of Blacks and women that they are universally cheats, hypocrites, tricksters, liars, shallow, greedy, faint-hearted, that their thinking is intuitive and illogical, that nature is what speaks most loudly in them. And then the next quote. They speak together of the threat they have constituted towards authority. They tell how they were burned on pyres to prevent them from assembling in future. They were able to command tempests, to sink fleets, to destroy armies. They have been mistresses of poisons, of the winds, of the will. They were able to exercise their powers at will and to transform all kinds of persons into mere animals, geese, pigs, birds, turtles. They have ruled over life and death. Their conjoined power has menaced hierarchical systems of governmental authorities. Their knowledge has competed successfully with the official knowledge to which they had no access. It has challenged it, found it wanting, threatened it, made it appear inefficacious. No police were powerful enough to track them down. No paid informers so opportunist, no torture so brutal, no army so overwhelming as to attack them one by one and destroy them. Then they chant the famous song that begins, despite all the evils they wish to crush me with, I will remain as steady as the three-legged cauldron. The next one. They say hell, let the earth become a vast hell. So they speak, crying and shouting. They say, let my words be like the tempest, the thunder, the lightning, that the mighty release from their height. They say, let me be seen everywhere, arms in hand. They say anger, hate, revolt. They say hell, let the earth become a vast hell, destroying, killing, and setting fire to the buildings of men, to theaters, national assemblies, to museums, libraries, prisons, psychiatric hospitals, factories, old and new, from which they free the slaves. They say, let the memory of Attila and his warrior hordes perish from history because of his meekness. They say that they are more barbarous than the most barbarous. Their armies grow hourly. Delegations go before them when they approach the towns. Together they sow disorder in the great cities, taking prisoners, putting to the sword all those who do not acknowledge their might. And the next one. They run as fast as they can. Some have a rattle in their throats. Others pant from the efforts. Some fall and do not rise again. Then it is necessary to stop and carry them on the shoulders of 4 of their number. They must run with them until refreshed. They once more move as fast as possible. Shelter is still far off. One of the hardier ones begins to sing a song to restore their courage. She says, do not hang your head like one who is conquered. She says, awake, take courage. The struggle is long, the struggle is arduous, but power is at the end of a rifle. All of them shout their enthusiasm with all their might. And finally, this is the last one. They say, shame on you. They say you are domesticated, forcibly fed, like geese in the yard of the farmer who fattens them. They say you strut about, you have no other care than to enjoy the good things your masters hand out, solicitous for your well-being so long as they stand to gain. They say there is no more distressing spectacle than that of slaves who take pleasure in their servile state. They say you are far from possessing the pride of those wild birds who refuse to hatch their eggs when they have been imprisoned. They say, take your time, consider this new species that seeks a new language. A great wind is sweeping the earth. The sun is about to rise. The birds no longer sing. The lilac and violet colors brighten the sky. They say, where will you begin? They say the prisons are open and serve as doss houses. They say that they have broken with the tradition of inside and outside, that the factories have each knocked down one of their walls, that offices have been installed in the open air, on the esplanades, in the rice fields. They say it would be a grave mistake to imagine that I would go, me, a woman, to speak violently against men when they have ceased to be my enemies. Thank you.
So relevant.
Thanks so much, Marcia. Wow, it's not easy to read Wittig, and you just nailed it.
So fun. I love reading.
That was amazing. And as I was listening to you read, maybe we'll remember in a bit in the program, of course, we'll hear one of the winners reading, Marianna ColesCurtiss, and I think you'll hear some resonance of that submission, that winning prize with what the passage, especially the last passage you just read, Marcia. We didn't plan that. It just turned out that way. Our next presenter is none other than Liz Lepofsky Kennedy, one of the founders of the Monique Wittig Scholarship Prize, along with Carol Flynn. Liz received her PhD in social anthropology from Cambridge University, England in 1972, and was a founding member of Women's Studies at SUNY Buffalo, where she taught for 28 years. I believe that it was at SUNY Buffalo where Liz met Wittig. I could be wrong, so you'll have to, is that right? Well, you'll tell us. You'll tell us when you speak. She is the author, of course, of Boots of Leather, Slippers of Gold, the history of a lesbian community, which I would argue, and many people would, I'm sure, agree, all of you probably would agree that it's really, that book has withstood the test of time. It's one of my own Bibles. And although she is retired from the Department of Gender and Women's Studies at the University of Arizona, she remains as busy as ever with her papers, with dissertation writers. She was just on a dissertation committee that I know of, Harrison Apples, who he was she was raving about this student. And so really busy. And as we were planning this event, I was struck by how often she said, gotta run because I have to go to another Zoom to do my Spanish lessons. So on top of everything else, that's Liz, right? And I see Liz is joined by her lifetime partner, Bobby Previs, both of whom were very, very good friends of Liz. We've asked Liz to talk specifically a bit about this scholarship prize.
Great.
Liz?
Thank you, Sandy. And you've been doing a wonderful job in keeping this going. And I think it's good that I think if I were a student in this event, I would be intimidated at this point. So I hope what I have to say in the founding brings students to the center, and you don't have to be writing like Monique at this point in your history. You just have to get started. All right, the Monique Wittig Writers Scholarship Award was created shortly after Wittig's death in 2003 by a group of Wittig students, colleagues, and friends, including but not limited to Robbie Ariu, Bev Seconder, Bobby Previs, Sandra Soto, Carol Flynn, Louise Turcotte, Julia Berlin, Sande Zeig, as we know, her partner 29 years, and myself. We met several times picnicking in Wittig's favorite spots in Sabino Canyon, drinking champagne and enjoying the beautiful light of sunset. We missed her fierce commitment to social justice and her friendship. We knew we wanted to do something that honored her work as a committed scholar and teacher and a brilliant thinker, and also kept her present in our lives. Endowing a scholarship in her name soon emerged from our conversations as the logical thing to do. Wittig loved her students. She enjoyed inspiring them to do their best work, to bring imagination to politics, and to innovate with language. The award would give the winner a little more free time for their work and would help build confidence in their voice and vision. At the same time, from the beginning, we envisioned the award as having a second purpose, the celebration of Wittig's work and her powerful feminist vision. We did this by making sure that the scholarship was awarded as part of a public ceremony. We invited friends and colleagues to read favorite portions of Wittig's writing. We had a table displaying Wittig's work, including the translations. When possible, Seconder would provide music, and friends always brought food and champagne. Champagne was always critical in these gatherings. This model was very successful. Since 2005, we have awarded 11 first place prizes and 2 second-place prizes. In addition, we have slowly increased the endowment through new donations so that we could increase the award from $500 to $1,000 and have the flexibility to offer a second place if the committee desired. And here I'll just make a aside that if people want to still contribute, the fund is open, and who knows, in another few years, we could award 3 prizes. This year, the awards committee decided to slightly modify the ceremony, as you've been hearing from Sandy all along. To familiarize people with the exciting new scholarship on Wittig, it reached out to Wittig scholars beyond our campus. In order to infuse our local ceremony with the excitement of ongoing research, particularly since this year is the 50th anniversary of the publication of the English version of Le Guerrier. Thank you to Sande Zeig for spearheading this approach and interesting people in participating in our event, even though they did not work in Tucson. Ironically, as Sandy has pointed out, these changes are consistent with the changes required in academic life by COVID-19. Essentially, you, today's audience, is experiencing a new format for the awards ceremony. We hope that the international vision of the ceremony will help to launch award winners into productive, creative careers as artists of the 21st century. So I think it's coming up that we'll hear from these prize winners. Great.
That's right, Liz. And was it at Buffalo that where you and Bobby met Wittig?
Yes, she was hired in Buffalo.
Okay. And then they both wound up, Wittig and Liz both wound up at the University of Arizona. Although Wittig, as many of you might know, was in the Department of French and Italian first, and then she moved over into the Department of Gender and Women's Studies.
Right, right. To just remind people of how oppressive the university can be, the French and Italian department actually had her teaching beginning French language. They didn't draw on her as this extraordinary scholar. And I think it was revenge for her smartness. It was really, and that was the situation when I arrived. And I received letters from all over the country saying, would you please rectify the situation at the university so that Wittig can teach the things that she's just superb at. And she's also a good language teacher, I'm sure, but I'm sure they could have other people teach that.
Thank you. Did you want to say hi, Bobby, while you're there?
Just hello, and I'm proud and happy to be a part of this today, as usual.
It's, you know, we don't see each other because even though we're all in Tucson, many of us are in Tucson, we can't see each other because of the pandemic. So it's been a long time that I've seen Bobby in person. Serving on this scholarship committee, as Liz just suggested, has been a labor of love. So even though for me it counts as a member of the department and the Department of GWS, Gender and Women's Studies, is where it's housed. Even though we're open to submissions from all over the university, as long as the submissions somehow implicitly or explicitly speak to some of the commitments of Wittig. it's a labor of love. It counts as service for me, but many of us do this work of this prize committee, even when we're on sabbatical or out of town, because that's just how much Wittig's work moves us. Many of us continue to teach Wittig. I even teach some of Wittig's works in my Chicana feminisms class, because I just think that her vision of what it means to be a minority writer and how critical she was about being pigeonholed, something for us to think about in my field of Chicana feminisms. And it blows some of the preconceived notions about minoritized writing that students bring to the class. This year we had such an amazing, I'm not exaggerating, everybody on the committee I think will agree that we had an amazingly rich pool of submissions. I think it was the most difficult juring that I've done, at least in many of these 11 years. And so we had a really hard time. We were sitting at a lesbian coffee shop called Bentley's, which is on the edge of the University of Arizona campus. Marcia, Laz, who you'll meet soon, Liz, and Sandy, of course, and Lee, and we just could not decide. So we ended up this year doing 2 runners-up, or you might call second place, although we don't like that language, and then our main winner. And so I'm really excited to introduce them. The first person who I would introduce as a second prize winner, unfortunately can't be here today, and I'm really bummed about that. They wanted to be here, but they are not in Tucson, and they're in a remote area that doesn't have good Wi-Fi. But we are taping this event, and we'll make sure to give it to make sure that Isaac Esposto, our second place winner, winner, watches this. We've asked one of our committee members, Laz Kinnaman, to read a very brief statement that Isaac would like to share with you. So I'm going to ask Laz Kinnaman to come on now.
Hi, you guys. It's so lovely to be here, and I'm loving looking at all these giant photos of Wittig in the background. So this statement is very short. It just says, from Isaac to the Monique Wittig Committee and community. In light of my absence from this ceremony, I want to send along my thanks and gratitude as a receipt of this award. The work submitted for this award would not exist without the many amazing communities who have welcomed me in. I owe a debt of gratitude to the mentors who shaped this piece, Dr. Susan Stryker, Dr. Sandra Soto, and Dr. Susan Briante, in addition to the lands where it first arose, Tohono O'odham and Miwok land. These kinships in writing informed and writing and inspired this writing in ways that remind me that writing is a gift. Thank you again to the committee, the U of A GWS department, and Lee Spencer for their time and energy. It's an honor to be considered along with the other amazing writers who strive to continue Dr. Wittig's work and legacy. So that's it.
Thank you, Laz. And I just want to say again that Laz is a member and has been an ongoing member of this scholarship prize, and is a PhD student here in the Department of Gender and Women's Studies at the University of Arizona, although right now is zooming in from Pocatello. Is that where you are right now, in Idaho? She's on her writing retreat. Finishing up her dissertation. Look out for her on the job market, although we would like to keep her here in Tucson if there's any way possible. Hi, Laz, it's good to see you. And we have your poster here ready for you when you come back in August. So we'll see you. Well, I don't know if we'll get to see you in person, but you'll be back. Thank you for reading Isaac's statement. And we'll make sure, as I said, that Isaac gets this recording. Isaac was a student of mine in Queer Theory's graduate seminar last year, and did an amazing job of always pushing me as a teacher and our fellow people in the class think about settler colonialism in relation to queer theory. Does queer theory help us think about genocide of Native peoples and settler colonialism? If so, tell me really how. Really, that's Isaac's persistence, and I learned so much from Isaac. The next person I want to honor here is Lucia Edafioca, who I didn't know before before getting to know Lucia through this her submission to us. She is a Nigerian writer who is interested in stories about families and identities. Like Isaac, she is an MFA candidate, although I think Isaac just finished probably. And Lucia is still an MFA student, an MFA candidate in the University of, or at the University of Arizona. Like many of our readers of works at this event, Lucia has worked hard to pull a piece out of her submission that is the right length, and she calls it a flash chapter. I've never heard of that before, but now I'm learning there's something called a flash chapter. So she's going to read a flash chapter entitled Circles. Lucia, thank you so much for being with us and for submitting to this prize. We're so proud of your work.
Thank you. My name is Lucia, and I am going to read from my work, Untitled Cycles. And this work, it's like, it's a folk tale. My grandma used to tell us when we were kids. It's like I rewrote the folk tale. It's basically like a story that is passed down from like generations, basically telling women to shut up because like when we speak, we cause problems in the world. So I rewrote it to fit into like a larger piece of my work in progress. So I'm going to read now. In the beginning, there was happiness. There was the sky and the earth. There were the gods who made everything green and wet for the men and their women. When there was happiness, the sky was a lingering shadow above everything green and wet, so close that a man could reach up and dip his hands into the clouds. When there was happiness, no man danced or prayed. There was only gales of laughter and songs woven together in ancient melodies. When there was happiness, the men gathered at the center of everything wet and green and sang the old songs that pleased the gods. The gods, drunk on the melodies, came down from the sky. They ate and drank and granted wishes to the men like rain. The women spied from behind walls in enclosed rooms, envious and jealous. They had their own songs and wishes too. They grew resentful towards the men who locked them in hidden places whenever the gods visited. Their collective envy and jealousy grew into red anger. It manifested in everything they did. When they pounded their peppers and yams and cassavas, wood hits wood and shook the earth. The top of their pistol hits the sky. Their grumbling, the low guttural mumbles that came from their throats as they complained in their kitchens and in enclosed rooms, gathered together like one big angry mouth and gave out an unending buzzing murmur. The deafening noise reached the sky. It pierced into the ear of each god like a taboo, so the gods moved their sky up from the earth, away from the noise. A new circle started and the men assembled. They sang and sang, they sang all day and all night, but the wind blew away parts of the melody and huge bird ate other parts of it. The songs reached the sky half-formed, tuneless and without shape. Disgusted, the gods moved their sky up, farther and farther above the hills and the mountains. No wishes were granted. Everything that was white and green became brown and dry. Then there was a terrible hunger because the rain wouldn't fall. The god that opened the rain vault couldn't hear the men asking for rain. Then the first man died. The death shocked all of them, men and women. The women's anger dissolved into silence. The women gathered together and cried and wished they had been quiet. If they had stayed inside their kitchens and not been so envious and jealous, there would have been no wars, no hunger, no famine, no suffering, no death. When the women had daughters, they told them of the beginning, when there was happiness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, Lucia, wow. Just to hear you read it makes a huge, I was going to say difference. That's not the right word, but it's just a very different experience to hear the writer read their own work than it is to read it on the page. Thank you so much for this. And once you're a Wittig scholar, we're in touch for life. In fact, we are inviting you, Isaac, and Marianna to be on next year's jury. That's our tradition, and then we keep tabs on you and encourage you. So thank you. Welcome to the Wittig family.
Thank you.
Okay, I need to make sure to share my screen. I'm not a good multitasker, as many people know. So let me do this. Just going to be quiet for a sec, and I'm going to share my screen. You might want to, if you're on gallery view, you might want to switch over to speaker view so you can see the screen and then just one speaker, our next reader, who's going to show some images. And let me pull out, I have her piece printed out so I know when to change the slides. Okay, so I'm now going to share my screen. You all can let me know if I do okay with this sharing of the screen. Can you see this structure here?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. All right. That Marianna ColesCurtiss's submission rose to the top of a very, very, as we've been saying, competitive pool is a testament to how important, compelling, and engaging her poetic and political voice is. From her cover letter, so one of the things that we ask of our submitters is to not only send in their submission, and the submission can be filmic, it can be textual, it can be theoretical. We like experimentation, right? And both in terms of genre, but also medium and form. We also ask for a cover letter from the person who is submitting. And we found Marianna ColesCurtiss's cover letter wonderfully captivating in and of itself. That day in Bentley's, I can remember the coffee shop, I can remember talking about the cover letter a lot. The imaginative poems through the final sentences, apt image of ideas, plans, and stories. We'll see these images as Marianna reads, make their way through the various built borders described in her writing. We found her work to be challenging in the best sense of that word, world-making, and most definitely in the tradition of Monique Wittig. Wittig was an expert experimenter with language, as Sande Zeig was saying before showing the first video, and as all of you know who know her work. Wittig's way with language was such that she could force us to imagine something not yet tried, to consider proposal that seemed absolutely incongruous with reality and decorum. So saying things like, lesbians are not women, right? And we felt that ColesCurtiss put in our minds a scene of breaking into a prison barrier. So think about that for a second, not breaking out of a prison barrier, but breaking into a prison, willingly inhabiting a wall, living inside a wall. The imaginative world that Marianna ColesCurtiss creates for us, her audience, is a gift because it allows us to imagine living and resisting otherwise. Her bio, Marianna Ariel ColesCurtiss hunts for moments when poetry has surfaced as a force in collective bodies, She can be found in off hours, jumping from rock to rock in the Tucson mountains. She is an MFA candidate in poetry at the University of Arizona, and her work has appeared in Hunger Mountain and Wind. Marianna will now read from The Use of the Thickness of a Wall as an Inhabitable Volume.
Thank you, Sandy. Thanks to everyone on the committee, and thanks, Lucia. It's really wonderful to hear you read. Thanks to everyone for being here. This is such a beautiful event, and I feel really honored to be a part of it. The work that I submitted for this scholarship came mostly out of a visitation program that I've been doing over the past year in a migrant detention center that's about an hour northwest of Tucson. And we visit with trans and queer asylum seekers there and support them through their legal process as much as we can. So I wrote, mostly my writing has been poems, but I'm going to read an essay today. And the essay feels very much pre-COVID, and you'll see what I mean by that. But yeah, I guess I just want to talk a little bit about how COVID is affecting folks in prison. So Eloy, where we visit, now has hundreds of COVID cases, and a guard died of COVID, and that means that folks are really just confined to their cells for most of the day. So I got a letter from someone recently saying they get out about 20 minutes each day to make a phone call and shower. So it's a particularly terrible time to be incarcerated right now. And I'm sure most of you know that, but just trying to keep those folks in mind who are kept so far away from our view most of the time. Yeah, so this piece feels in some ways a little obsolete in this time of COVID, and at the same time it feels really, really relevant as calls for the abolition of police and the abolition of prison. Prisons have really been heightened through this incredible time of uprising in support of the movement for Black Lives. Internationally also, which is really, really cool. Okay, so yes, this is called The Use of the Thickness of a Wall as an Inhabitable Volume. And that title is borrowed from an architecture blog, which Susan Briante showed me. So Susan, if you're here, thank you. Okay. In her blog post, Walls as Rooms to Fortified Castles in Transylvania, Maria Bruna Fabrizi describes churches built before there was a threat of invasion, and the walls which were subsequently constructed around the churches once a threat became present or perceived. The fortresses protected a piece of land and its inhabitants, while some of the inhabitants, peasants and servants, lived within the walls. The church fortress walls are the inverse of the walls created by caged, empty ground around prisons. Inhabited walls are made of rooms in the daily lives of some of the people they are meant to protect. The peasants' lives are marginalized, and that they live in the literal margins of a walled space. They are housed in a utilitarian sense, and what might be seen as a sacrificial zone, but a zone which is aimed at protection nonetheless. In contrast, the prison holds marginalized bodies understood to have breached or which already exist outside of the social contract with the state at its core rather than at its periphery. The architecture is aimed at preventing escape, and the mode of ensuring that prevention is one enabled by emptiness. The uninhabited caged spaces around prisons are walls built to keep the inside from the outside and are made impenetrable by an absence between two fences. The prison wall becomes effective only because compound surfaces are divided by an emptiness, a place for a body to snag in its labor of escape. On its own, each razor wire topped chain link fence is a penetrable barrier. But with two fences and the emptiness between, there comes an extreme risk of exposure. The liminal is transformed into a surveillance mode. Time becomes the limiting factor for those inside who would move outwards. Ironically, time is generally one of the only excesses allowed in prisons. Who or what inhabits the surveillance mode? Not trees, maybe some grass. Lizards might pass through, birds, bugs, mice, soil bacteria. Empty space is never empty. A friend told me recently about a cactus which lived in the yard of the immigration prison where she was locked up. Seeds pass through the air, on the wind, in the bodies of birds. And the servants and peasants who inhabit the fortress walls, do their lives add layers of protection to the church, to the citizenry? They live in the most vulnerable space possible. Human edges touch both the crust of separation from invaders and the common closed ground of the masters. And here it seems important to note that land ownership in this time was not absolute, and peasants had all kinds of assumed rights to the land, even as it did not technically belong to them. Foucault traces this shift in land rights as ushering in a new set of illegalities, and ultimately leading towards the system of punishment which today manifests in prisons and their surrounding industries and mechanisms of control. So back to the living walls. Do living walls become more effective because of the life they house? Are the lives in the walls sacrificed, or could living in the wall be an act of love? Could there be a way of inhabiting a protective wall that gives the wall a productive kind of porosity? Do the lives transform within, giving breath to protection? The living walls were improvisational. Fabrizi points out that while the cathedrals themselves were carefully planned, the walls, as afterthoughts, moved only where they could, where they must, given the restrictions of the landscape. I like to imagine coming upon the shapes of these walls, reading improvisation in the rock. In the service porch, Fred Moten writes, "Suppose we don't take place. Our thing would be subpositional, and we'd have to keep falling in love with that. We'd have to assume the apposition. The incarcerated ground around the prison is forced into a kind of subposition by the operations of power. Divorced from the movements of mammals larger than mice, and requiring a lack of plants for visibility purposes, the land cannot experience time the way that other wild spaces do. What would happen if the prison's doubled fences were filled with lives? The prisoners are always so far from the outermost fence. From outside, in the parking lot, on the road, they are forms, never faces. I imagine a political action art installation commune project in which a group of non-prisoners assume the apposition, taking up residence in the emptiness between the two fences, all the goings-on exposed. The wall dwellers arrive en masse and act fast, creating a body barrier between people cutting through the chain link and the prison guards. By a stroke of luck, no one is shot. The guards are caught off guard, overwhelmed by the numbers, and everyone who wishes to take up residence in the wall is allowed in before the commune members patch the hole they've made. By this time, a larger police force arrives from a nearby town, and prison guards from other prisons have been called for backup. The cops are ready to open fire on the invaders, but they are stunned to see that the group inside does not continue on towards the yard. Instead, they begin to unpack the large bags they have brought inside. Soon there are beds, stoves, a small library, a meeting space with chairs, and the experiment begins. The authorities are extremely confused about the appropriate measures for such a situation. Hordes of reporters have arrived, and of course, the entire prison is on lockdown. A statement issued by the artists promises that the experiment is simply that, an experiment. They print out large photos of living fortress walls in Transylvania, explaining that their purpose is only to better understand the fortress, to relate to an inhabitable volume through an artistic lens. The prison administration, befuddled, gradually relaxes its lockdown. As the space thickens with the bodies of the commune members and their accoutrements, the walls take on a greater permeability. Small objects pass between the holes in the chain link. Rolled scraps of paper, candy bars and fresh vegetables, cigarettes, a cell phone or two. Ideas, stories, and plans also pass through the gaps in wire. And I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marianna. That was amazing. That was amazing. Did y'all get to see Marianna as she was reading?
Yes.
On the side of, thanks. Okay, good. I couldn't see her. That was a little bit of a bummer for me, but I'm glad that other people could see Marianna. That was amazing. And you see what I was catching the resonance between that last passage that Marcia read from Les Guerrières and this image of walls and passing things through the walls. I love that. I love that image. If Marianna's name sounds familiar to you, I wasn't planning on saying this, but Marianna is known locally as one of the Arizona Three. Is it okay if I say that? One of the Arizona Three. She was charged by the University of Arizona Police Department last year for bravely, well, that's not why they charged her. They didn't call her brave, but I think it was a very brave, as many people here thought it was very brave of her to join her voice with some other voices when in one of our buildings on campus called Modern Languages, where English is, creative writing, there were some armed Border Patrol agents in the hallways of Modern Languages with guns. And so students, one of whom was Marianna, and there were two undergraduate students, the three of them just, and others too, but the three of them started to protest just spontaneously upon the site, the visceral site of what is a very traumatic site for many, many people in the borderlands, which is armed and uniformed Border Patrol members. So thank you for that too. That's something that I wasn't planning on saying, but thank you, Marianna. And now we have two very special guests. I'm gonna introduce them both together, and they are gonna be reading from Witig's works, a very special treat. And again, I wanna thank Sande Zeig for her efforts to make the best of this, of Zoom, and to invite folks to read from Witig's work who don't live in Tucson. So readings from two scholars of Witig's work, Garréta and Laure Murat. I mentioned them earlier in the introduction. Professor Murat is the director of the Center for European and Russian Studies at UCLA and professor in the Department of French and Francophone Studies. She specializes in cultural studies, history of psychiatry, and queer theory. She is the author of several prize-winning books, and in 2012, she was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship for her book, Women as Symptom or Madness at Work. And Garréta is a research professor of literature at Duke University and has published 6 novels, although this bio might even be dated because I'm not sure, I haven't updated my own bio on a website in many years. But as of the time that this bio was put up on Duke University's website already, she had published 6 novels, starting with Sphinx in 1986, and many of these have been translated into many languages. Her research specialties and teaching specialties include the Enlightenment, the relationship between literature and the sciences, contemporary cultural figures, and the philosophical genealogy of current critical concepts and problems, to name a few. So I will welcome both of them, and they're, I believe, gonna go back and forth.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Thank you very much. We're very happy, Anne and I, to be part of this event. Anne from Virginia and me from the south of France, where I'm still happily confined. Anne and I know each other for almost 20 years. Actually, we really started our never-ending conversation when I published an article in the Magazine Littéraire in Paris, trying to define what would be a so-called lesbian literature. I'm not sure this exists, but who knows. I was ending the article by a quite dramatic statement naming Anne Garréta as, I quote, the only spiritual heir of Monique Wittig in France. No less, and still relevant. Since then, our common interest for literature, theory, or gender studies led us to collaborate frequently on many projects in France and in the US, thanks to our shared transatlantic experience, colloquiums, lectures, public readings, radio programs, even co-teaching, and of course, parties.
With champagne.
We are especially grateful to Sande Zeig to invite us today to celebrate once again and together the work of Monique Wittig.
In 2014, Suzette Robichon and I founded the Association des Amis de Monique Wittig. And of course, we count Laure as one such friend, Laure who has proved herself quite a fearless guerrière, critical essay after critical essay, most recently on the transatlantic aftershock of the Me Too movement. Now, the inaugural event of the Association des Amis de Monique Wittig was a reading of Lepofsky at the Paris Maison de la Poésie on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of its publication and reception of the Prix Médicis. You have to remember that at the time, only in 2014, only 12 women writers had ever received that distinction in its more than half a century of existence. 6 of these women writers were on stage to read Monique Wittig's book, and the event was sold out.
In 2019, at the instigation of Suzette Robichon, a reading of Monique Wittig's Guerrière was organized in Paris at la Maison de la Poésie. Anne and I, along with Virginie Despentes, as it was stated in the introduction, and Rebecca Chaillon were the 4 readers, while Suzette who was the organizer, made the introductory remarks. And that reading was a stunning success. Seats sold out in the space of 48 hours. A second evening was added, which again sold out. And for those who are interested, you can view the video capture of the reading through the Centre Simone de Beauvoir. You can find that on the internet very easily.
The point here is that clearly there is something in Wittig's texts, in her thought and her language. There is something that has withstood the test of time, or even better, with time. The relevance and depth of her radical outlook on politics, language, emancipation, and literature is coming into sharper focus.
So we will read from 2 of Monique Wittig's texts, an essay titled On the Social Contract, which first appeared in English in Feminist Issues in the spring of 1989, and an excerpt from the play titled The Constant Journey, published in 1985. And because my dear friend Anne likes not only to procrastinate, but to change things at the last minute, we revert the order, and we will begin with this excerpt from The Constant Journey called Madness.
So this is a play on Cervantes' Quixote, and we have thus distributed the roles. Laure is Panza, and I am Quixote. Okay. What do they say about me in the village, Panza? Is everyone well acquainted with my adventures? Are they proud of the famous Quixote de la Mancha? Are they happy to have become, thanks to me, the focus of the entire world?
Everyone in the village says that you're queer. They say that those great people, those famous conqueresses whom you speak about, don't exist and never did.
In the village, they dare to deny the reality of what is written in the books? Panza, is it not true that Mirin conquered Asia all the way from the Black Sea to the island Taprobana?
By Quixote, yes.
Is it not true that the Thermodantine Amazons have attacked Athens?
Yes, of course.
And that they have raised towers that held the Greek city for many years?
Indeed, yes.
And that the accounts of their exploits would fill so many books that it would take more than your entire lifetime to read them?
They say knights errant haven't existed for a long time, if they ever did exist other than in legend. They say you're wrong to invent injustices that don't exist and that only serve as an excuse for you to wander around the country.
I told you, Panza, that we would be persecuted as soon as they understood what we were attacking. But Panza, what do you think?
Well, dear Quixote, as the saying goes, one swallow doesn't make a summer, and far from it, I dare to add, and as the saying goes, a pitcher that goes so often to water finally breaks, and a rolling stone gathers no moss.
Panza, have I not often told you that a well-employed proverb could pass if absolutely necessary?
I'm coming to my point. Do you agree that our travels haven't made us any richer?
Very well.
And that someone who exaggerates will eventually fall flat on her face?
How does that concern us?
Can't you see that all of this will end badly since you want to be right while disagreeing with everybody?
Why?
Quixote, you don't seem to see that they all think you're mad.
Even if the whole world thinks that I am mad, and not only those backward people in the village who have not seen anything, I will say that the whole world is crazy and that only I am right. Okay, now let me preface our second reading, the reading of Monique Wittig's essay, with this short consideration on translation. In 1762, Jean-Jacques Rousseau famously declared at the outset of his major work of political philosophy titled Du contrat social, and I quote, "L'homme est né libre et partout il est dans les fers." A modern, well-meaning translation of this goes, Laure?
Sorry, excuse me. Man is born free and everywhere he is in change.
Actually, it should have been, Laure, all human beings are born free, yet everywhere they are in chains, since this is how the modern translation goes. But pronouns, their gender and their number matter, as we have all learned from Monique Wittig. So I find the standard translation just given by Laure, the standard translation of Rousseau's stock statement, more productive. Man is born free and everywhere he is in chains. Why paper over the founding problem of modern political theory? If man is born free, how about women? And this is the question opened up by the translation of Rousseau and its reconsideration in Monique Wittig's 1989 piece on the social contract, from which we're now going to read a few excerpts. Laure.
So this is the excerpt of On the Social Contract by Monique Wittig. I have always thought that women are a class structured very much as was the class of serfs.
The structure of our class in terms of the whole world is feudal in essence, maintaining side by side and in the same persons forms of production and of exploitation that are at the same time capitalist and pre-capitalist.
To write a language offers a very concrete matter to grasp hold of. It seems to me that the first, the permanent, and the final social contract is language.
The basic agreement between human beings, indeed what makes them human and makes them social, is language.
I have used several times the term heterosexual contract in my past writings, as well as referred to the social contract as heterosexual. Why did I urge vehemently that we should break off the heterosexual social contract?
According to Rousseau, the social contract is the sum of fundamental conventions which, quote, even though they might never have been formally enunciated, are nevertheless implied by living in society, end of quote. Each contractor has to reaffirm the contract in new terms for the contract to remain in existence. In the social contract, Rousseau also says, and I quote, "The strongest is never strong enough to be always the master, unless he transforms strength into right and obedience into duty. Hence, the right of the strongest, which, though to all seeming meant ironically, is really laid down as a fundamental principle. Suppose for a moment that this so-called right exists. I maintain that the sole result is a mass of inexplicable nonsense. For what kind of right is that which perishes when force fails? If we must obey perforce, there is no need to obey because we ought. And if we are not forced to obey, we are under no obligation to do so. Clearly, the word right adds nothing to force. In this connection, it means absolutely nothing."
I come back to the historical situation women are in. I'm not a prince, I'm not a legislator, but an active member of society. I consider it my duty to examine the set of rules, obligations, and constraints this society has placed upon me.
For whether we want it or not, we are living in society here and now. And proof is given that we say yes to the social bond when we conform to the conventions and rules that were never formally enunciated, but that nevertheless everybody knows and applies like magic. Proof is given that we say yes to the social bond when we talk a common language, as we do now.
Outlaw and mad are the names for those who refuse to go by the rules and conventions, as well as for those who refuse and cannot speak the common language. This is what interests me when I talk of the social contract, precisely the rules and conventions that have never been formally enunciated, the rules and conventions that go without saying for the scientific mind as well as for the common people, that which for them obviously makes life possible, exactly as one must have for them 2 legs and 2 arms, or one must breathe to live.
We live, function, talk, work, marry together. Indeed, the conventions and the language show on a dotted line the bulk of the social contract, which consists in living in heterosexuality. For to live in society is to live in heterosexuality.
The social contract I'm talking about is heterosexuality. I confront a non-existent object, a fetish, an ideological form which cannot grasp in reality, except through its effects, whose existence lies in the mind of people, but in a way that affects their whole life, the way they act, the way they move, the way they think.
So we are dealing with an object both imaginary and real.
If I try to look at the dotted line that delineates the bulk of the social contract, it moves, it shifts, and sometimes it produces something visible, and sometimes it disappears altogether. It looks like the Mobius strip. Now I see this, now I see something quite different. What then is heterosexuality?
As a term, it was created as a counterpart of homosexuality at the beginning of this century, last century. Jurists would not call it an institution, or in other words, heterosexuality as an institution has no juridical existence. Anthropologists, ethnologists, sociologists would come to take it for an institution, but as an unwritten, unspoken one. So they assume a quality of already there, due to something exterior to a social order. The already there of two groups, men and women. For them, men are social beings, women are natural beings. And so does Lévi-Strauss with his famous notion of the exchange of women. He believes that he deals with invariance.
He and all the social scientists who do not see the problem I'm trying to underline would of course never talk in terms of social contract. It is indeed much simpler to take what I call social contract in terms of status quo, that is, in terms of something that has not changed, will not change.
Thus, we have in the literature these words, fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, etc., whose relations can be studied as though they had to go on and on as such forever. Aristotle was much more cynical when he stated in the Politics that things must be, and I quote, "The first point is that those which are ineffective without each other must be united in a pair. For example, the union of male and female," end of quote. And so from that time on, the heterosexual relationship has been the parameter, the paradigm of all hierarchical relations.
Now I return to Lévi-Strauss, for I'm not going to pass by the idea of the exchange of women, which until now has been so favored by feminist theorists.
And not by chance, since with this theory, we have revealed the whole plot, the whole conspiracy of fathers, brothers, husbands against half of humankind.
Women, the slaves of the poor, as Aristotle called them, are always there at hand. They are the valuables that make life worthwhile, according to Lévi-Strauss. When Lévi-Strauss described what the exchange of women is and how it works, he was obviously drawing for us the broad lines of the social contract, but a social contract from which women are excluded, a social contract between men. Each time the exchange takes place, it confirms between men a contract of appropriation of all women.
For Lévi-Strauss, society cannot function or exist without this exchange. By showing this, he exposes heterosexuality as not only an institution, but as the social contract and as a political regime. There cannot be any fear of a rebellion when it comes to women. Even better, they have been convinced that they want what they are forced to do and that they are part of the contract of society that excludes them.
Because even if we do not consent, we cannot think outside of the mental categories of heterosexuality. Heterosexuality is always already there within all mental categories.
For even abstract philosophical categories act upon the real, the social.
Language casts sheaves of reality upon the social body, stamping it and violently shaping it.
When Adrienne Rich said, heterosexuality is compulsory, it was a step forward in the comprehension of the kind of social contract we are dealing with.
Nicole Claude Mathieu, a French anthropologist, made it clear that it is not because we remain silent that we consent.
And how can we consent to a social contract that reduces us by obligation to sexual beings, meaningful only through their reproductive activities?
I will say that only by running away from their class can women enter the social contract, that is, a new one, even if they have to do it like the fugitive serfs, one by one.
And we are doing it. Lesbians are runaways, marooned slaves. Breaking off the heterosexual social contract is a necessity for those who do not consent to it. For if there is something real in the ideas of Rousseau, it is that we can form voluntary associations here and now, and here and now reformulate the social contract to the new one, although we are not princes nor legislators.
Is this mere utopia? Then I will stay with Socrates' view and also Glaucon's. If ultimately we are denied a new social order, which therefore can exist only in words, I will find it in myself. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that beautiful reading. I think it really worked on Zoom to read the piece because of the back and forth. I think it would have been a very different experience if it were just one of you, but the difference in light also in your different time zones, as well as your very different voices. And just intonation. And so thank you for that, because I imagine that took quite a bit of work and rehearsal to get that down in the way that you did. I have been watching Dominique translate, and you must be exhausted. How you doing, Dominique? Listen, we're gonna momentarily leave you, we're a bit over time. We're gonna leave you with the film, the second film. I mentioned when we first met that this event is framed by two films, both of them by Zeig. And if you can stay for just a few minutes to at least hear some of Wittig's voice, because for me, that's the real treat of ending. We talked a lot about the order, as you do whenever you're planning an event, like what's the order of things, and we switch things around quite a bit. Usually it's our tradition to end the event with the scholarship winners. We wanted to foreground those a little bit more. And what's really special, I think, about the film that we're gonna start to play as people leave, and you're welcome to stay for the whole 17 minutes and watch the entire film, is that you hear Wittig's voice for that long, 17 minutes. You hear her voice as you see these beautiful images that Sande Zeig has put together. And so it's a true collaboration. It's a true piece of art by Sande and her partner, Deo or Wittig, image and Deo's voice. But before, I wasn't planning on doing this, but it just seems like so strange for all of us to be gathered here and to not hear each other's voices. Does anybody want to say hello, even if it's, hey, I'm over here, or toast to our winners, anything?
Congratulations to the winners, and thank you so much for such an amazing reading, Anne and Laura. It was beautiful.
We love you, Julia Evelyn.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for being there and for remaining friends of Monique Wittig. Join the association.
We invite you all to Tucson. We can take you to exactly the spots that she loved to hike in. And the thing about Deo, the thing about Wittig is she loved the desert. You know, we're just so lucky that she was here, and she wound up in Tucson, Arizona. I mean, come on. But she loved the desert and she loved to hike in it. And when you come, you'll be our guests, and after the pandemic, and we will take you to exactly the spots where she loved to hike. That's what she liked to do.
Okay, so maybe I'll just introduce this short film. Basically, it was developed for the conference that was at Yale drafting Monique Wittig. And it was for a panel that I participated on with Anne Garréta, Alice Kaplan, who's here. Hello, Alice, and Suzette Robichon. It was organized by Morgan and Annabelle Kim, Morgan Cadieux, Annabelle Kim. So the round table was about how to write the life of a feminist writer and thinker. And there's a lot of discussion around this issue, but when I was considering about what I would like to participate in for this panel, and knowing that Wittig was against, during her lifetime, the idea of biography, I decided to work on a short video, which in my mind I call Wittig's Way. And so for me, this way was using Wittig's voice, reading the category of sex, because for me, the concepts in this article, which was originally written in 1976, have still not been taken further than the page. And if any have been taken, they still have not gone far enough. So for me, as a background, I really wanted to offer this to you. This is only the second time it's been shown, for us to say it is about time to take action, to take more action. So some of the people who know Wittig will know some of these images. For others that don't, I hope that this will give you a deeper feeling for some of the events and places that she inhabited, juxtaposed with the shock of her words. And so I had this extraordinary privilege in my life and honor to share most of my life with Monique Wittig, as well as living with the loss of her. So it's been difficult for me to approach making a video, but I hope that this will offer something to you. Whoops. And I will share my screen. Give me a moment. Okay, here we go. Yeah.